rather than talking about 3 momentous things that happened last year in design, I'm going to talk about the discussions that happened about design, which are almost more important than the objects themselves. Of course, there were some really arresting objects. For instance, this beautiful couch by Yuya Ushida, a Japanese-Dutch designer, that is a couch that opens and closes like an accordion. But what I would like to explain to everybody today, well, you already know because you're an audience of people that are already converted, is that design is so much more than furniture, so much more than cars, so much more than objects that are commodities, and it's truly about life. Design is political, and last year there were so many discussions about the political power of design. Going back in years, there are many examples of design taking a political stance, and actually I'm not going to talk too much about visualization because my friend Adam Bly will discuss it, but I would like to point out to you this quite amazing project that happened in 2004. This project by Josh On was a way to visualize the connections between corporate boards in the United States and different parts of the government, therefore showing all of the possible collusions and conflicts of interest. It was truly a political visualization of what was going on in the United States. It used computers, it used design as a political power. And the same happened later on also with works like this by Diller Scofidio that was about showing great migrations of people all over the world, including also the idea of remittances. So showing masses moving around the world and creating a new economy or a different economy. And you see, this is all design. People don't think about it. They think of chairs. But design is activist. All of these categories will be connected. So last year, there were so many protests. And these protests made me think of a project by Ralph Borland. Ralph Borland is a South African designer who a few years ago did this beautiful object that's called Suited for Subversion that is meant to protect protestants from the police batons. So you see it's padded, so everything is okay. Plus there is a camera that's hidden on top of the head so you can film all the action and everything is on the record, transmitted to a server that is remote, so there's no tampering possible. But the most beautiful part about this object is a loudspeaker on the heart that amplifies the heartbeat and reminds policemen that this is a human being they're dealing with, and also imagine hundreds of people wearing it in this collective heartbeat projecting. It becomes almost threatening. So truly, activism in design. Another beautiful way to be activist is to make visible what is usually invisible. So the problem of homelessness, well, this is India, so you know this reality, but it's a reality that happens all over the world, and very often homeless people are invisible. So these designers have decided to create homeless shelters that are very colorful so that people can see them from everywhere. This is Los Angeles, and this is instead a similar project done in the slums in Bogota. So activist design, design that really deals with the reality of the world. This is the work of Masoud Hassani, a graduate of the Eindhoven Academy of Design, that was born in Afghanistan and dealt with landmines all of his life in his childhood. He designed this very simple bamboo studs and then plastic paddles ball that kind of rolls onto minefields and explodes with the mines. So, and then can be refurbished very easily. So dealing with reality is what design is about. And last year there was a lot of discussion about so-called humanitarian design. A lot of design companies from the so-called first world move into the so-called third world with solutions. And it's a form of cultural colonialism that has been criticized. Of course, it's something that has to do with idealism. The intentions are good, but very often they're misinterpreted or misled. Last year, there was a lot of discussion about the One Laptop Per Child program, which you might know about, that was initiated by Nicholas Negroponte, who was the founder, one of the founders of the MIT Media Lab. And that was a very idealistic program that started hitting a lot of hurdles. It was supposed to be $100 per laptop, then they became $170 and then even more, and it didn't have the penetration that it wanted to have. But it was an idealistic program that was not realistic enough. Nonetheless, it was hailed as an interesting program. Also very criticized, but equally interesting, was the project of the Chulha stove by Philips Design, the Philips Design cell that is based here in India, actually, that was meant to actually give a possible solution to the fumes that are so toxic for when people cook inside their huts or inside their homes. This was a more sensitive kind of design because it was at least done with people that knew what they were doing because they were part of the culture. But very often, humanitarian or even responsible design has had to deal with the issue of globalism versus local culture. A very interesting example is Project H. Project H is a company that was founded by two 20-something-year-olds, really, really idealistic, wonderful people. Emily Piloton is the most well-known of them. And when they launched, they started with a very ambitious idea, which was to redesign the famous Hippo roller. You might know about the Hippo roller. It was the design of two South African engineers, and it was meant to help people in Africa, especially women and children, drag water from the rivers, often a few miles, to the village and making it easier. So Emily and Matthew, her husband, decided to address this issue like a full-fledged design company. They saw that there were some flaws in the design, some flaws in the manufacturing, and they set out to solve them all. Well, what happened is that they hit their face into the wall of reality once again, the reality of working so far away from a reality that they did not know. So what did they do? They learned from their mistake, and they went really, really local. And the next thing that they did was to start a design school in rural Alabama and to work with the population there to design kitchen coops and a new farmer's market. And much to their surprise, they learned more from the experience and they were able to do much more. So learning to be first local and then maybe global is something that has been proven very effective elsewhere. This is another example from Chile. It's the company Elemental. It's an architecture company that enables people in Chile who are able, because of a special economic social system, to have a small loan given from the state to buy their first home. It enables them to actually get almost like a blank canvas of a home on which they can build a whole community. So examples like this can also migrate in very different formats, also to places like London. And here you see it's always so difficult to take a picture of this kind of design, especially when it's so impalpable as this. Participle is a company in London that works with human beings. In this case, it's working with elderly people and teaching them to actually re-establish a community by using social networks and using the internet. It also works with obese people, with convicts, and with many different social systems that need some design help. So socially responsible design, humanitarian design, engaged design, however you want to call it, is a reality that is more powerful than ever. And it has a lot to do with doing things by yourself, with your hands, with your own resources. And this is where I would like to talk to you a little bit about thinkering. Thinkering is a word that was coined by Richard Seeley Brown, who was a really great, he was one of the founders of Xerox PARC, which is a lab, a think tank in Palo Alto where so many great innovations happening. And it's the fusion of the word thinking and the word tinkering. So it's about making things that teach you more about what you're doing. And thinkering is at the basis of so much of design today. You're seeing here a great example from Guatemala. There's a company in Guatemala called Maya Pedal that does all sorts of machinery that is pedaled, that is powered by pedaling. And so they take pieces of bicycles, they refurbish them, and they make pumps for water, they make textile machinery. So everything is pedaled, and it's become a company that is really powerful because it stems from the community. Another form of thinkering that is very well known, and if you don't know it, I really want to give it to you with all my heart, is this example, which is quite amazing. This was called the iWriter. It's still called the iWriter. It's a group of programmers and engineers and designers from New York and other parts of the countries in the United States that got together to help a graffiti artist from LA that was completely paralyzed in bed because of Lou Gehrig disease. They helped him tag buildings again with his eyes. It's a very complex but simple project. It's made of one pair of cheap eyeglasses, a computer camera, and software. And everything is open source, so you can buy for about $45. You can make it for everybody. The software is published. But basically, the camera reads the movements of the eyeballs. And by using his eyeballs, Tempt1 was able to form on a screen his tag and then wirelessly send it to a laptop in downtown Los Angeles that then tagged a building. I don't know if you can see it here. A building in downtown LA, and Tempt1 was able to see that all happen with his eyes. And it gave him this amazing emotion. It enabled him to do something he thought he would never, ever be able to do again. Now, look at this. Open source, completely generous. It's available for everybody. And it was made for one, but it can be used by so many. And that's what design is about today, the design that I am interested in. It's altruism, activism, and the real intention to make the world better just a little bit at a time without big pronunciations. And a little bit at a time is what this machine can do. 3D printing is something that's existed for 15 years maybe, but it used to be, and it still is, when you want to do complex shapes, very expensive. But this group of hackers in New York and Thinker in New York has designed this machine that you can buy, still quite expensive. It's about $350. It's a machine that you can make by yourself that enables you to do 3D printing, small little things, things that geeks like to do, little cups, little elephants, nothing really big yet. But it's a start. It's about putting the power of 3D printing in the hands of the people. And I think it really moves a step forward because it gives thinkerers also this capability. And you know, thinkering doesn't happen only in engineering. It also happens in furniture. I really love the work of Martino Gamper. This is a project from a few years ago. It was 100 chairs in 100 days. He went all over town grabbing pieces of trash or pieces of leftover from his friends, and he created 100 mutant chairs. Responsibility. Responsibility can be a very sanctimonious word, and you know, sometimes when you think of responsible design, you think of ugliness, this kind of Birkenstock look. But the beautiful thing is that designers have matured enough as to be able to be responsible, activist, political, and all of these difficult words, and also be elegant. Because you know what? Design still is about elegance, and even about the B word, you know, the scary word beauty. And you know, beauty doesn't cost much than ugliness, and it's a human right. And so designers have learned to not be afraid of being elegant, even when they are responsible. Last year in Beijing, during Design Week, there was a very beautiful project in a little restaurant in Dashilar. That was actually initiated by Jane Withers, who's a curator and critic in London. It was about how much water do you eat. The problem of knowing how responsible we are when we move about in our daily life is a problem of metrics and is a problem of understanding. We don't know what the water or carbon footprint is of what we do, but we would like to know it because I'm sure that we would all adjust our behavior if we could. And in this case, the whole menu of the restaurant also had the water footprint of all the foods without trying to reduce it or augment it, just for people to know. And it was very well done, very elegant, and very explicit. Another beautifully, elegantly responsible project is the work of Forma Fantasma. Forma Fantasma, I'm very proud because I'm Sardinian, is a group formed of two men, one from Sardinia, one from Sicily. They are like these gorgeous, like really Italian, dark men, you know, they look fantastic. And they live and work in Eindhoven. They also went to the Eindhoven Academy. Last year, or 2 years ago, they did this fantastic project that I think will resonate a lot also here in India, using vegetal resins, like old-fashioned resins that are organic, to make these beautiful crafted pieces. So it was a way to recuperate also the birth of plastics as organic materials. It was very educational, and it was educational also because it was so elegant. Design is about communicating by beauty, by means of beauty and by means of elegance, complex sometimes ideas. And in this case, I want to arc back to an exhibition that happened at MoMA last year that was called Talk to Me, that it was about the communication between people and objects. This project that I'm showing to you here is at the same time political, elegant, informative, communicative. It's the work of Berg London. Berg is a company that does visualization design and interfaces and interaction, and it's called BBC Dimensions. It's a website that enables you to take events that have happened somewhere in the world that might seem abstract, like the floods in Afghanistan or the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and lets you superimpose them onto your home turf. You enter your zip code, and all of a sudden you see the magnitude of the floods in Afghanistan over New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. Connecticut, I don't remember what's next. 18 years in New York, and I don't know my geography. Anyway, at that point, you get to see really how big that devastation was. So it's about understanding. And the power of design that's added to the power of computing today is incredibly enormous. But communicative design is also about helping people deal with their oldest rituals and their faith sometimes, enhancing it with technology. And here are some tools to speak with God. This is a beautiful tool that was designed by Central St. Martin's in London, the school, for some nuns in Kent, in England. They are cloistered nuns, Catholic nuns, so they have hardly any contact with the outside world. They get a few Vatican newspapers, but you know how unreliable those are. And they don't really know what's going on. So this beautiful object that's designed almost as if you were a ritualistic church object is a ticker tape that is connected to Google News that lets them know what's going on in the world and gives them topics to pray about. And the nuns have been using it for more than a year now, and they say that it keeps their prayers pertinent, that they really, really use it. And here is something also for Muslims, because there's something about technology and religion for everybody. This is a Muslim prayer mat that has a luminescent underlayer and a compass module, so when it's lined up with Mecca perfectly, it lights up, it glows. So you see, it's not only about new rituals, it's also about old ones. And I like very much this project. There was just an ephemeral project, but it reminds me of like old runes in Celtic culture, or even Maya and Aztec land art. It's about communicating with the gods high up above, and it's a QR tag that is mown into a lawn in Germany, and that, when read with the appropriate device, spells "Hello World," which, as you know, is the beginning of any new program for computer, but it's also like a gesture towards the sky. So the beauty of design that deals with the poetry and with the tragedies of humanity is something that is very important. And design today, the most interesting design, is very sensitive. And I realize here that I have way too much about Eindhoven, but Lee, I didn't do it on purpose. Are you here, Lee? Yeah, good, you are here. So this is truly one of my favorite exhibitions ever. It was in 2006, and Lee was responsible for it. It was the exhibition by the students of the Eindhoven Academy in Milan at the Furniture Fair, and it was about the subject of death. It was fantastic, and I'm showing here only 3 examples from an emergency coffin that is completely biodegradable. But there was one project that was incredible. I mean, it's difficult to tackle death by design, but the most arresting project was by a student called Tessa, who had cancer, who documented all of her cancer. It still gives me shivers. All of her cancer history through these beautiful illustrations, and who didn't make it to Milan. She died before. So the fact of trying to use design to communicate, to express rituals, in a beautiful way, in a very poetic way, something that we value beyond anything else. And more recently, the same academy in Eindhoven presented this really stunning project. In some countries in Europe, in the Netherlands, for instance, if a fetus is aborted before the 24th week, even naturally, it's not considered something that needs to be buried. It's considered a thing and not a person. But parents might need the ritual of burial. So this designer, with a student, designed these biodegradable coffins, very small, for smaller and smaller fetuses, so that parents can have closure, can have a ritual with it. It's really amazing, and there's so much design like this today. Much less arresting, maybe, but still quite deep, is this Rubik's Cube for the blind, in which instead of colors, you have the Braille word for the color. So even blind people can actually play with it. And this is the work, actually, it's quite funny because both Adam Bly and I love this designer. So instead of using 4 slides like I usually do, I only used 1, thinking he would use them. And instead he told me he thought I would use them, so he didn't show you anything. So he will not, but I'm going to tell you more about her. It's Revital Cohen, who's a designer in London. And she works a lot with scientists, but what she does is she sets scientists free. The collaboration between science and design, you'll hear from Adam more about it, is really beneficial. It's wonderful, not only because designers find ways to experiment, but also because scientists are able to kind of set themselves free from the limits and the hurdles of scientific process. They're not under such scrutiny. They can be a little freer. So in this case, Revital has been working on the ghost limb syndrome, the syndrome that amputees have when they keep on feeling their limb. And it's usually cured by making that feeling disappear using therapy, using mirrors. And instead, she says, let's harness that particular feeling so that maybe we can regrow some nervous terminations. So it's interesting to see designers really getting engaged also with scientific experiments. So a lot of design is visionary that way, by collaborating with scientists, by collaborating with sometimes script writers, sometimes with other narrators. Visionary is something that is part of the design idiom today. And this is the work of Daisy Ginsburg and James King, which I think you will find very funny, and so do I, but it's very serious. So some designers have been working with synthetic biologists. Synthetic biology is a new branch of biology that is based on the idea of taking bricks of DNA to engineer new forms of life. And in this particular case, Daisy Ginsburg and James King worked with some students of synthetic biology to re-engineer E. coli. E. coli, we all have them in our guts. They're bacteria that live with us every day. Sometimes they get completely out of control and they become fatal, but they're part of our lives. They decided to re-engineer these E. coli and make them change color in our guts according to certain chemicals that they would encounter that could be a signal of different maladies and pathologies. So what happens is that you take a milkshake of the engineered E. coli that are now called E. chromai. They go through your system. They decide whether you have ulcer or maybe you have diverticulitis or colitis, etc. And your stool becomes the diagnostic tool. So that's why they're called E. chromai. And you see, and the same thing they did also for teeth problems. So you drink this and then your teeth become colored depending on what kind of pathology you have. There are also some more poetic ways to really use design, and design has become more and more almost like art. Sometimes it's not about showing objects that you can use right away, but it's about visualizing concepts that were hard to visualize before. This, for instance, is a camera. Of course, it's fictitious, but it gives you really the sense when you look through it that tries to explain to you the theory of the many universes. So the idea that there are many parallel dimensions. I don't know if you see Fringe here in India. Well, in Fringe, there's only 2 universes. Here, there's many. So basically, you see the same thing happening, slightly modified in many different ways. And it gives you a sense of really how the different parallel universes could be. So design is first and foremost today critical. That is what not using immediately design to give you tools, but rather to give you food for thought is. And critical design has become a bona fide discipline, and it's been canonized in a way by the Royal College of Art in London, especially by the Design Interactions program, which is run by Tony Dunn, and together with Fiona Raby, his partner in life and at work, Dunn and Raby have created some of the most iconic pieces of critical design. I mean, critical design in a way arcs back to radical design of the end of the 1960s and of the 1970s, and it's about pointing out dangerous, interesting, possible, potential futures that new technological innovations could lead us to. It's about thinking of the future and not only about the present. And it's really articulated through beautiful objects that tell a very strong story. For instance, this is Foragers, one of the latest projects by Dunn and Raby that was part of a project by Design Indaba, the South African conference, that was about the future of farming. So the whole project was about the future of mankind when there will be a food shortage. We will really have trouble also converting agriculturally several lands. So what Dunn and Raby decided to focus on is not land, but rather our gastrointestinal system. And they decided, there's a lot of gastrointestinal going on with designers today, I guess, but they decided that we should go back to digesting what we used to digest centuries ago, roots, algae, leaves of trees. But by doing so, they would need to create some outsourced gastrointestinal system. So they designed these objects. This is to digest the algae. This is to gather and eat trees. There's another one for roots. A whole series of objects that are about this possible potential future. So you see them here. They realize them, of course, as models. And actually, we just put them on display right now at the Museum of Modern Art in an exhibition that just opened last week on Friday. They're gorgeous objects that are here demonstrated in the French countryside. And they talk about the way we could live in the future when we will have to find new means, old means, new means to survive. So ultimately, this is a slide that Tony and Fiona use all the time. The kind of design that we're used to is number A, and the kind of design that we will look to more in the future is B. So it's about foreseeing the future, or at least trying to have an interpretation of it. So instead of being affirmative, like the old type of design, it is critical. Instead of being about problem solving, it's about problem finding. It's about first identifying a new problem and then solving it. And so on and so forth, for the world how it is, for the world how it could be. That's what is really important about the way we teach design and we practice design today. There is much more philosophy, there is much more understanding, there is much more narrative, there is much more script writing. Designers are not anymore just problem solvers, the cliches of the past, or form follows function, or less is more. Enough of those cliches. Designers are much more complex just because the world itself is much more complex. And crafts and high technology coexist because the world is not only about software, it's also about the physical reality of everyday life. And I think that India is uniquely positioned to be at the same time at the forefront of this revolution between high-tech and low-tech, and between deep humanity and really a projection towards a more software-based future. Thank you very much.